Anyway, my next guest has got a chicken on his CD cover. It's a new comedy CD, the very best of Paul Morrissey, and it's available from his website. Please welcome back to the show, chicken lover Paul Morrissey.
Welcome, everybody, to the Alley Oop Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Morrissey, and it's a beautiful day in Studio City, California. I don't know what it's like where you are or what time you're listening, and frankly, I don't want to know. You're listening, so we're going to entertain you. This episode, very special. My good friend, author, comedian, actor, he does it all. Larry Miller is our guest, and Larry and I became friends a few years ago. Larry's been one of the best comedians around for years. He started at the comic strip in New York City. He's been best friends with Jerry Seinfeld for the last, since the late 70s, I guess, when they were coming up at the comic strip. And we get into a bunch of those stories, too. Jerry and Larry actually traded acts a few nights, which was like this, this rumor that I heard that they traded acts a couple times, and I didn't think was true, but turns out, well, I won't spoil it for you. I'll let Larry tell the story. And so we ended up meeting at the Comedy Magic Club a few years ago, and Larry was preparing for a appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman. And I happened to be on the show, and I gave him a couple tags, as they say in the business. I gave him a couple extra little words or phrases at the end of the joke that helped him out. So he asked if I could be on the shows the rest of the week with him. So basically, saw the set every night and had him kind of practice and develop it. And so Larry was very cool and appreciative and asked if he could do anything for me. So I actually had just bought a recorder, didn't have a podcast yet. That's how weird these things are. For some reason, I just wanted to sit down and interview him. I didn't know if this would turn into, I'd end up hosting a show or doing something, but I would have this cool interview with Larry Miller asking him about his life in comedy. So I actually do have that interview. I think we're going to put it on the bonus, like a bonus episode, after this. So that's from a few years ago, but a lot of cool stories about starting comedy in New York City with Seinfeld and Paul Reiser and all the really great ones. Some really cool stories. But then last year, Larry had a fall. You've read in the news, basically said that he fell and doctors induced him into a coma, and he was in the hospital for a few months, and I didn't really hear anything. And finally, it popped up on Facebook somehow. Jay Leno always performs at the Comedy Magic Club on Sundays, and Larry and Jerry Seinfeld and a few other guys showed up and all did sets, and I think it was Larry's first set back since his fall. So I hadn't talked to him in a while, and I bought, the last time I interviewed Larry, I found out that he was a huge fan of not only Frank Zappa, but he was basically admitted to being a Deadhead. He loved the Grateful Dead. And so I had a Jerry Garcia tie that I had on, and I don't know if I had it on. I don't wear ties much, but Larry wears ties all the time. That's one of the funny things. He really wonders if he has the right tie on. That's one of the things that goes through his head right before the stage. He wants to feel put together, because he was one of those guys. I was not made to wear a suit and tie, but Larry Miller was. He just looks together, looks like a guy with a suit and tie. So I found this Jerry Garcia tie for him, I think over Christmas maybe, and I was hoping that I would see him again. I was worried for a little while and wanted to make sure when I saw him I would be able to give him this tie. And so we traded text messages a couple times over last couple months, and finally ended up chatting with him the other day. I went over to his house and met him for this interview and gave him the tie, and he's really touched, and it was a cool moment, and I could tell how much it meant to him, and it was really good to see him again. So he's back, better than ever. He definitely is appreciative of this chance, because it could have been a really serious thing. It was a serious thing, but he's back and better than ever. He's already, too busy, much busier than me. He's doing, he was leaving for an acting job later this week, and so we fit in this interview, and it's a great interview. He talks, we talk about everything. We get into favorite movies, starting in comedy, his musical career, his job at Amtrak. We cover everything. And so it was a lot of fun chatting with him. Hope you enjoy it. And if you don't know Larry Miller, if you just were happening to listen to this podcast, I mean, he's been on basically his big role. He was kind of the kiss ass in the movie Pretty Woman, and had a great role. And then he's been in every Christopher Guest movie, which is like Best in Show, Waiting for Guffman, For Your Consideration, Mighty Wind. He's always funny in those. He's always like a great mean principal or dad. He was the dean in Nutty Professor, which was great. And he also has I don't want to call it legendary because that makes it seem old, but he has a bit, as we call it in stand-up, called The 5 Levels of Drinking, which is like this. I mean, I've seen him do a 15-minute version of it, and it's just almost like a play. It's just a masterpiece. So if you haven't listened to that, I'll put a link to it on the website on alleyooppodcast.com. But for now, if you want to go to alleyooppodcast.com, if you're shopping for Amazon stuff, just click on our link to get to Amazon, and we get a little piece of that without it costing you any money. So go there. Hotels.com, same deal. And Uber is a private car service. You download the app, and it'll take you wherever you need to go. No tipping, no anything. Your credit card's already linked up to it, and you just it just picks you up, and you get $20 free if you sign up through the alleyooppodcast.com website. And also, if you want to donate $1 or $2, help support the cause. I'm doing this on my own here. It's become a great thing, and we have a lot of listeners now, which is cool. So if you want to donate $1 or $2, I'll send you a download for my CD. You can just click on donate on the alleyooppodcast.com website. So, and anything else about me, you can go to my official website. It's paulhasawebsite.com. But for now, we're recovering from our first comedian basketball league game. Our legendary team, Sean Kemp's kids, Jeff Dye, Jeff Keith, Brian Moot, Andrew Santino, Adam Ray, Ari Shafir, Johnny LaQuasto. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. I got everybody right. Yeah. We play every Monday now, so it was basically a preseason game last night. We're still easing into it. We don't show up until the playoffs, basically. So so I'm recovering from that, so it was a pleasure listening to this interview again with Larry. This was fun, so I hope you enjoy it as much as I did, and we'll make sure we get the bonus episode of that older interview, too, which is kind of cool to listen to it. And we'll start things off. One of the great things that Larry did in the last couple years, he was in the Palestinian Chicken episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, which I think is the best episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and also, arguably, in the best episode of Seinfeld. He was in the Doorman episode, which also was the Manzier, I think is what they called it, the Man Bra episode of Seinfeld. That was the other, with Kramer and George's dad inventing the Manzier. I think it was what it was called, the bra for men. And we'll start off with a clip from The Doorman, which was Larry as a mean doorman. So I hope you enjoy this, and thanks for listening.
We really lucked out with Larry Miller in that episode, too.
Yeah.
That was a great character.
He was my best friend, still is, and he ended up playing the part of the doorman.
I was struck by how relaxed Larry Miller was as a sort of vicious doorman.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. May I help you?
Yeah, I'm just going up to see Elaine Venice.
Venice. There's no one here by that name.
Oh, she's house sitting for Mr. Pitt.
Ah, house sitter.
Yeah.
What are you, the boyfriend? Here for a quickie?
But my favorite story is the Seinfeld when you guys were trading acts on April Fools, which I don't think I'd ever heard that story before. I saw it mentioned somewhere, and I'm like, this can't be true. I got to ask Larry about this.
Yeah, it's great. It's just a good comics bit to do with your friend, and you're both friends, and you're both comics. And we just, how'd it come up? I don't know. We just done April Fools, which, of course, is April Fool's Day. And I'm not a big prankster. I'm not really one who, and then the guy's pants are on fire. I never really liked that sort of thing. But that we just started doing this, that on April Fool's Day, that show, that night, we would switch acts.
Right.
And it was great fun to do. Much easier for me because that was before I really started writing, where every word is a brick and everything is in the right place. So Jerry was always a great writer, and he could write, and he'd write the material out. So I, by watching, knew the material because we knew each other's acts backwards.
Right.
And my act at that point was a series of word pictures that really just that I'm very pleased was entertaining, but
yeah,
he would do that, and then I would do his.
And this was a crew of about 6 of you guys, right? Paul Reiser and
not
Carol
doing this
Leifer.
though. But
Oh, really?
not
This was
switching
just...
acts. No, just Jerry and I did.
Oh,
that.
it was just you guys for April
Fool's Day. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The crew you mentioned, that was our little comedy gang, I guess, of Reiser and Schiff and Brogan and Carol and a few folks, but that's just your hallmates, your locker mates, the folks at the lockers next to you.
Well, I told you, I think I'll introduce you before we get too far. This is, of course, the great Larry Miller, comedian, actor, writer, producer, and a friend of mine. We haven't spoken in a while, so it's good to see you, and glad you're doing well. You look fantastic.
Thanks, and so do you. My dog is
very happy.
all over Paul now. And you know what though? That's by saying we're friends. It's not too sappy to say when comics are friends. The other stuff is implied, really. That means you get each other's acts, you get each other's heads. I know, and you know. I could always walk up to you in the hallway of the Comedy and Magic Club and say, "Hey, what about this bit? I'm going to turn these phrases around. What do you think of this? Which one of these do you like?" Now, it doesn't mean that's exactly the one I'm going to do, but I know I'll get a good read on it.
Right. Yeah, and that's, I think, that's the first time we met at the Comedy and Magic Club.
That's right.
You were coming back after kind of a stand-up hiatus, I guess, which I think we discussed that. Was that a purposeful thing? I mean, you still performed a few times a year while the acting career was the main focus. But
look, I love acting very much. It's a big part of my life. And I love writing and script writing very much. It's a big part of my life. But then I realized again, I'm a comic, first and last and always. And that's not only good news, it's great news. It's a great way to live, to be a storyteller, to work in word pictures, and to say, you know what? Something, as people out there know, there's something very important and deep about comedy, about laughter. People have written books about, hey, it's a good cure for illness and stuff. That's fine. By the way, that's another thing that's great to me, seriously, about show business, that no matter how far we get, we can have comedy clubs on Mars, and someone is still going to have to say, I think your cord is out. It's really still that basic.
Yeah.
I love in movies that there's still, with all the effects people do, with all the astonishing loftiness of how the visual elements of a story can be told.
Yeah.
With everything thrown into where we are today, still I love that some shots you just have to attach a very thick rope to the back of the dolly that the camera's on.
Yeah.
And 2 or 3 big guys pull it very slowly.
Right.
And that's a shot. That's not because they're trying to hold on to anything. It's not like the railroad saying, no, we'll still have a fireman even after there's no coal.
Right,
know?
right.
But that's the way to do it. I really like that that's still the way to do it. That is no other way. Who wants the other way?
Yeah.
I like that 2 big guys pull a very thick rope that's knotted onto the back of a dolly. So the next time people see a movie and there's a shot, why, look, it's a pan shot of the whole bar scene there, or the mountains, or whatever it is. And look at that, why they're pulling back, and now I'm getting a better view of the whole scene. Remember, it's 2 big guys pulling a rope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they haven't figured out a better way to do it. That's the best way.
It's wonderful. And by the way, that's probably the truth about acting and comedy and writing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do styles change? Sure, but it's still how wonderful and pure and basic that with stand-up, for instance, it's someone coming out on the stage there and saying, thank you, folks, it's good to be here, and then beginning to entertain with his word pictures.
Yeah. And I will say that that's one of the I think it probably was the best show that I've seen comedy-wise was when I was lucky enough, I think I ended up in Vegas at the same time, and Seinfeld was doing the big Caesar's Palace. That's like the Coliseum or something. It's a huge venue, right?
Yeah.
And you ended up being on the show with him.
That's right.
And so I was even walking in, I'm like, this is almost too big for comedy. Like, this is more of like a music or show some videos or something. Even I was getting a little weird about, I don't know if this is, gonna work in these bigger venues. And then, of course, you came out, and then Jerry, and it was just an hour and 45 minutes of it was a fantastic show, and it just really instilled like, hey, this is still an amazing show to see. Just guys telling jokes.
Thank you. That's cool to hear. It's very sweet. But
yeah.
I'll tell you something also. When we were baby comics, the first year we were in this thing in New York, 5 or 6 of us went to see Bill Cosby at Carnegie Hall.
Uh-huh.
And that gave us a similar feeling. We walked in there. It's Carnegie Hall.
Right.
And oddly enough, I've worked there since, but that's another story. This is Carnegie Hall, and it's Bill Cosby. He doesn't have anyone opening for the show, and we sat down there in good seats right in the middle in Carnegie Hall, and it was very moving that on the stage it was empty. There was just a chair. There were just baffles put up along the back. There was no. This is a place that holds ballets, symphony orchestras. There's nothing there except right in the middle, downstage, just about 8 or 10 feet from the edge of the stage. There was one chair, just a chair, like the kind of chair your history teacher had in 8th grade.
Right.
That chair with sort of the fake rubber backs. And not that he was asking for that, but I'm just saying get a chair. Here's a chair from the ticket taker's office. And they put the chair on there, and there was a microphone sitting on the chair, sitting there with the cord going off to off stage. And as we were walking in, and no one was on stage, of course, but we got a big charge out of that. It wasn't that we laughed. We said, now there it is. That's what it's all about.
Right.
That's what this guy is going to do. If you landed from Mars and said, what's on this show tonight? That's what's on this show tonight.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think for those guys that work at those theaters, I think it's probably pretty funny too that they're used to having an orchestra lineup or all these sound checks. I mean, you do those all the time. I've gotten to do some theater shows with Jim Gaffigan, and it's always funny when they actually do a sound check. It's just like, I'm just going to be out here talking like this.
Same thing. That's our sound check. I did when I had a corporate job last week in Orlando, Florida, and they wanted, and I'm a good boy. I do what anyone wants, and so it's fine with me. We'll do a sound check. We went down there to, say, 2 in the afternoon on the day of the show. But that's exactly what happens on every either corporate job, as you just said, anything in a theater. I have the one-man show I'm doing, Cocktails with Larry Miller, and the same thing. I'm going to block the show, but the same thing. The sound check is, does that sound okay to you? Okay, because there's no yelling. I don't,
Right.
I'm not going to have any explosions. It's just going to be a kind of chatting.
Which I think I saw the first one of the first shows right down
That's
in
right.
Was that Long Beach or somewhere down?
It was somewhere. You know
further
what?
south?
That works to say that way. It was
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
Where was it? It was somewhere down
Somewhere not in Hollywood, but
from where
south.
we are now.
Yeah.
It was somewhere down from here.
And closer to the beach.
Yeah. Yeah, by the way, speaking of the Comedy Magic Club, which is in Hermosa Beach, and people don't know, if you ever get out to Southern California, you should go. It's a great place. It's the place I think we love best in many
Yeah.
ways. And I didn't know first 15 years, 20 years that I was here, I always went down to the Comedy and Magic Club and still pulled over, onto the Aviation Boulevard and all the streets that take you right down Hermosa Beach Boulevard, right down to the club. But I never knew it was right on the beach. I never knew that was the beach with the ocean.
Right.
I didn't know. I knew that, there's the club. I'll go park in the back there on the roof and then go into the club. And one day Mike Lacey, who's the owner there, as you know, and just a great guy, called me and a couple of fellows down to work on a script he was putting together. And this was during the day, so this was about 1 PM. And it was the first time I'd seen. I came over the hill there in the car, and so and you just went, oh, good Lord, because there's the Pacific Ocean.
Right.
I had no idea it was there for only 20 years of going there.
Right.
A billion times.
Yeah, I remember it was the first 6 months, because you drive down there at 7:30 or whatever it is, and you just jump in and you don't realize. And you park on the roof. I mean, the roof itself has a fantastic view of the ocean.
It's a perfect view. It's like being at the top of the Eiffel Tower. You couldn't want anything better.
Yeah.
But we just don't think that way. We're still thinking about, I wonder who the waitresses are tonight. But that's the way, we should think, and wondering about new material you're memorizing, whatever it is you're doing. And you're worrying about saying hello to the people who work there.
Right.
Waiters, waitresses, all the folks who are, seating people, who are bouncers there. Say hi to everyone, and you go in and you sit in the back. And as you know, the green room in the back has no windows. It doesn't matter. You still don't know where you are.
Right.
So
it's like Vegas.
Yes. And the waitress comes by, would you like anything? Yeah, I'll have, thanks, I'll have the chicken frick or something, And it's always fabulous. So that's what we know.
Yeah.
Until you come over that hill at 1 PM and say, oh, good Lord.
Well, you mentioned the one-man show, which I've seen, and that's one of the questions I want to ask, because I'll stay focused, I promise. I won't stay here all day. But I want to ask you about, because you play piano in the show, and a lot of great. You wrote your own songs, and kind of blends nicely with all the stories and everything. It's a great show.
Good.
But
thank you.
where does the music begin with you? Like, was that because I've read a couple of things about you being a drummer or a piano player, and I don't think we've actually discussed this. So I was curious to see where that all started.
Well, it's all come down to right now then.
Yeah.
You know what? Music is a big part of my life, but hadn't been. In elementary school and junior high and high school, and I was a music major in college, and it was a few things. I played cello first and still have one downstairs, and then piano, and then drums, all around the same time, first, second, third grade, and just played them forever, and drums, and became percussionist, and then... But it's a big part of life. I was a drummer in a lot of rock and jazz bands, and did some studio work, and it was good.
Yeah?
It was good to be. And then when I got out of school and spent the first, year or two just saying, well, what now, potato head, And then, in fact, I worked at Amtrak for about 5-6 months, and one of the women there was a friend said to me, because I was talking about comedy, and she said, my uncle works at a new comedy club that just opened, the Comic Strip. And her uncle, by the way, is Tony DeAndrea, is a great comic, and we became friends. And but she said, maybe you want to see him and take a look at it. I said, great. And I went down there Tuesday night. He was also tending bar that night, and he took me in the back room there, in the showroom, and just sat me in the alcove, and it was... I don't know, I guess midnight or 1 AM. And Seinfeld was the first act I saw go up, in fact, oddly enough. The MC brought him up, and everyone was wearing comic strip T-shirts. And so that's the start of comedy. But then I knew that, well, they were thinking of putting on a drummer. There was a piano player, Cliff Corman, and he was thinking of adding a drummer. And I said to him, you should add me. I'm a drummer. And that wound up happening.
Oh, wow.
And I think I auditioned for him, and then... But the point is that became a part of life.
Yeah.
So I'm the drummer now, not only to start the show with Cliff, but then there were singers on the show, 1 or 2 or 3 singers on, so we'd back up the singers.
That's great.
And it was terrific fun. And it was a big part of life. So I would be there for the whole show until I went on. When you start as a comic, as you know, when you start out, you get on, in the New York clubs, you could get on as late as 4 in the morning, and then 3, and then as you get promoted in a way, and then 2, and then you're on at 1. And then the height was to become an MC there. But the point is that's the path.
Mm-hmm. And so during the Amtrak days, was there, because I've talked to a couple guys about this, was there any restlessness with you? Like, what am I going to do? Or was that the simpler part of your life?
I think in a way it's the same as it is today. You read stories about, or in a biography about someone who was so focused he could never be swayed from anything. Mm-hmm. And he always knew that this was going to be something like this. And I'm not sure I ever felt that. I just always thought, I don't know that I had a hard thought. I wound up on audition lines at comedy clubs.
Okay.
A couple of years after leaving school.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it should be.
Right.
And I could have gone to law school or some other kind of school. But if I did, I would have wound up in this chair talking to you anyway.
Right.
Because if I had become a lawyer and started working in trials, I would have started writing scripts as well. Mm-hmm. And those scripts, being a writer, would have led to, again, this chair and this talk.
Yeah, that's interesting that you think of it that way, because I always think of, like, the decisions that I made. And I will say, too, you were very nice. One of the nights, my parents were actually, they haven't been out here in a while, but one of the times that they came out, and we happened to be on the show together. And even then, at that point, they've always been very supportive, but they just don't understand show business, like that, where I'm from.
Well, if we don't understand it, why should they? But go ahead.
So my mom and dad were always kind of concerned, but when they see someone like you, or somebody that's successful in this business, kind of reinforce that, hey, this guy's good, he's one of us. That kind of really. Because I don't know what the line was. I think you said something about, like, what do you want him to be, an accountant or something like that?
Well, it was in a nicer way than that. But what I say to people sometimes when they come up and say, my kid wants to be in show business, what should I do? And I mean it with all my heart when I say, I know it's your child. And it sounds crazy to get into show business. But then what would be better? That he works for Aetna?
Right. Yeah, that's what it was.
Would that be better? Better for what? Not better for him.
Right.
So he'd get a salary and then get fired when he's 41 because he's really not very good at it. And everyone says, you're nice to hang around with and you're funny, but you're really not going to work here anymore. And so what would be better?
Yeah.
Might as well, you know what? If the choice was between living to be 1,000 or living to be 50, well, there's no choice there anyway, because you're still going to live to be 70, 80, 90, something like that, if you don't get hit by a wrecking ball,
Right.
And so all of us are the same. Why be in show business? Why not?
Yeah.
Well, you have to do something. It might as well be something you were made to do. Mm-hmm. And so then when you have that the big talk with God one day, like about 10 minutes after dying, and you're sitting in the office, well, you don't want that meeting to start with, why didn't you do what I sent you to do?
Yeah.
To do, rather. Why didn't you do?
Right.
Well, I really felt like being in show business. And why didn't you? Because that's you. Now you have to go back and be a turtle.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to be. No one wants to be. But they do the things I sent them to do. So, you know what? It's good to be in show business.
Well, yeah, thanks for that, by the way. You've been a really good support, and that's why I knew you're a big music. Well, you actually wrote your thesis
songs
on.
the show, and there's going to be more music in the show. And by the way, it's because also my mom, both my parents passed away in the mid-'90s, so my mom used to say to me, why don't you bring music into your show? Well, now I have.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not in every show. The corporate job, for instance, I just did, is pure stand-up.
Right.
And I love pure stand-up, and I'll never stop loving it.
Mm-hmm.
But now, on this new frontier, in a way, a one-man show, I'm not adding things to make the show beefier. I'm adding things to make me beefier, to do the things I was made to do.
Right. Yeah, and that's the kind of, I guess, the older version of entertainer, to be able to do a bunch of different things, or to be able to sing, dance, play music, like all that kind of stuff, which I think the comedians now, we just never even thought of that. I mean, I took tap dancing for 1 year in fourth grade, and that was it.
Yeah, but you're right. In the early part of the 20th century, the first 60 years of it, really the whole point of show business, and through the 19th century too, and involved with theaters and traveling shows, the whole point was anyone who wanted to be in show business and had some talent would study dance and singing and musicianship and really everything else, so that you could be. Oh, someone told me once that in the old British Shakespeare companies, for the first 10 years you're in it, you're spear carrier number 4 in some, in Julius Caesar, but that's good. And then you get a couple of lines. You don't have no lines for 10 years, but you really learn everything about what a play is.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we all used to do too. We learned it with comedy.
Right.
There's nothing, you can't stand on a lot of lines in the rain and not learn something. And so we weren't handed anything, but yeah, there was a time when you'd learn 7 or 8 things because that's what everyone did.
Right. And that's it's funny, I did another interview with a couple of Canadian comics, and they got hired by a Chinese agent to do shows over there. And they end up, the prime gig was they're performing at the Miss China pageant. And it's like millions of people are watching this. And so they realize a couple hours before the show, hey, communist government officials aren't going to laugh at anything, and we might end up in jail if we say the wrong joke. So they said, well, you guys are entertainers. Can you sing? And so not only did these idiots say yes, but they sang, the one guy sang Hello, I Love You by the Doors. And then the other guy, who can't sing at all, sang My Girl by the Temptations.
Of course.
So, yeah, try to replace 4 great singers on a song, and it was just a complete disaster.
Well, or I thought you were going to say, and it went fine.
No, they had to hide in their hotel room, and I wouldn't have even believed this if they didn't have all of it on video. It was hilarious.
Oh, I can believe it, but yeah, we all would have done the same thing. They're comics. They're a little loopy, so you realize, you're in the middle of China somewhere. Come here. It's funny, being men, and when you said it was the Miss China pageant, that's where every guy is going to suddenly sit up and say, really?
I'll do it.
How many? Yeah. How many girls do they have? But that's, then you start thinking of every restaurant you ever went into where there were some really pretty women on the calendars.
Yeah. All right. Well, I wanted to tell you, too, that my dad just started playing the drums in the last year.
How do you like that?
And he loves it. He's taking lessons, and when he goes to Florida for about 3 months a year, my mom just says how much he misses the drums.
Oh, that's so sweet, and it's so cool.
Yeah. Do you have like a set around still, or is that something that you kind of?
Yeah, and I don't play much drums now. I'm playing piano in the show,
Right,
in
yeah,
the
of
one-man
course.
show, and behind these songs. I was also playing cello for a while.
Whoa.
The first few months of it. And I'm pretty good at these instruments.
Yeah?
But for now, it seems best to leave it to the piano and then bring other things in. Well, yeah, it's like an old spot on the Ed Sullivan Show where the guy's spinning the plates. And now, hey, look at that, he's playing the trumpet, you know. And so I'm sure there'll be other things in it, but at this point I love that when people come into that theater
Yeah.
to see the show, they'll see what looks like a man's den, study, living room. There's a bar and couches there, and it's set up nicely, and there's a grand piano.
Yeah, and plus you don't want to carry around the cello. You know, that's a...
Well, the first few months, no, I guess you don't. That's hard for people who are in symphonies or in quartets, and they have to travel all around. But the first few months, we went, Pat Hazel's producing it, and from Sweetwood Productions in Austin, and he would always call up, and he'd ask the theater there, you know, do you have a cello maker in town there or anywhere near, or who gives instruments to the school or sells instruments? And they always found something. They always found, once it was a really nice cellist, or rather a violin maker, and he made cellos too, and he sent a really nice instrument and to a theater I was going to be in, what was it, 4 or 5 nights. Oh, that's right. That's where we added, I would take the cello on stage, and Pat was off stage, and he'd just hand it to me, and I'd do the piece and the bit with the cello, and then it was nice if people would applaud, and I'd take the cello off stage and hand the bow and the cello to Pat, and then just start to say something as if you're going on to the next piece. And you know, it's funny, folks, and then Pat would... And we recorded it that afternoon. The folks who were on the crew there enjoyed doing it, too, because we wanted to record as if he put the cello down and the bow on it, you know, to be careful. This is done off stage.
Yeah.
And then you hear, like, crumple as if wood is falling, and then you hear, sprang, you know, and then we recorded this stuff that went over the theater sound system. And it was recorded well, though, in each theater. And as if this $1 billion cello had just fallen over or was, you know, hit by a sandbag.
That was the one of the funniest parts of that. I think it's that documentary about Woody Allen when he's traveling with the music, the New Orleans Jazz Company there. And it's a documentary called Wild Man Blues, I think, or Wild Man Blues. And so showing the guy with the upright bass.
Imagine having to tote that bass around everybody. They should have told him when he was a kid, you know, flute.
That's so funny. That's what anyone, I used to say that when I was a kid too, and that's what any big string player is going to come to. You couldn't play the piccolo?
Yeah. The tuba?
Yeah.
You're going to bring that around for 3 notes?
You're really, and it's great to have. It's great to play.
Yeah.
But sure, there can be times when you don't want to carry it through an airport.
Okay, so I'm sticking to my script here. You have 3 or 4 of my favorite stories, so I want to check on this. Well, the story that I really love is, so I watched and you have, you know, your historic bit, I don't want to, legendary, I will say it, the 5 levels of drinking.
Right.
That's the joke I'm sure that everyone requests and they kind of know you from. And I think is that on the One Night Stand or the HBO, the one in, was that Denver, I think, or?
I think it is, on that one, on the DVD.
What was that special? And remember, you guys did a sketch before.
No, I know.
Yeah.
It's, I have that, if there's an encore in the one-man show, I do the 5 levels of drinking.
Oh, okay.
And it's very flattering and has been for years, and I've done it on Carson and a bunch of shows like that, and it's very cool that a piece like that has appealed to people, because it's, the 5 levels of drinking that everyone at least once in life has been out more or less all night, and with friends from school. And so it's very satisfying and gratifying to hear that people respond to it. If they've never heard it, that's great too. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to know people like you and me have the ability to write things and perform things that people really respond to.
There are 5 levels of drinking. 6 if you live in a trailer park. Okay. But never mind that now.
Yeah, was that... Were you able to do the whole version when you did... so that was the Carson Tonight Show? Or was that...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it didn't have some of the asides I have in it now and some of the places we let it grow a bit.
Right.
But it was still... That's a long piece. And for the Carson Show, or whenever I did it on TV, even if you just shave it a bit and really punch it out there, it's still going to be 7 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
That's a little on the long side, and then it's longer in person. But that still shows you can just do things. And I think back sometimes now saying, wow, how did I get the nerve to just go out there and do that?
Yeah.
Well, we're comics, and if you think this is the best stuff I have, and it is the best stuff you have at that time, and why not do it?
Yeah. So is that something that started as one idea, or did you think of the whole concept?
Oh, I remember writing it in the first apartment I had out here, and it took a while. And I rehearsed the chunks of it at the Comedy and Magic Club, and which is a little odd, too, when you think about it. So you're going up as a comic, and you're closing the show with 1 level of drinking. And what about the other 4? Well, I haven't written them yet.
We'll see you next week.
Yeah, you'll have to come back. I'll come back. But there's a great innocence to that too, about the nature of creating and performing. Mm-hmm. I didn't think I was giving only half a loaf. Mm-hmm. I thought, this is what I have, and I'm going to do it.
Right.
And because I'm happy with it, and I'm proud of it, and I'm just glad I kept writing and folks kept responding, and I kept responding.
Yeah.
So, sure enough. And there's always more to write. Gosh, there's always more to write.
Well, it's good that you still have, like, a great relationship to that didn't become something that, like, oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. Or was there ever a time where it was like you'd like to take some time off from it, or did it just keep developing into a bigger thing?
Well, it's all, and none of those things in a way. We make these things and we write them, and it's good to keep doing them, especially one that does well, that succeeds. Mm-hmm. That's a longer signature piece.
Right.
Look at some of the greatest stars like Sinatra and all these folks, or, well, the Beach Boys. Sinatra would come out and always close the show with New York, New York, or the Beach Boys, whatever their stuff is. And all the greatest stars, I think, always did that. Mm-hmm. Tony Bennett with Let My Heart in San Francisco. I mean, and they've all always said, when asked about it, oh, it's great. It's wonderful you have a piece that people really not only really like, but want to hear.
Yeah.
And want you to do.
And was it always that way, or was it Jim Gaffigan has his Hot Pockets piece? I don't know if you've ever seen that. So he'll come out and do that for his encore, because there's people that come with Hot Pockets, and Hot Pockets actually, I think, tried to, like, hand out coupons before, like, and he's just like, it won't go away because they just keep making more of them. It's just a thing. So it's like, it's something where he has that kind of relationship with it where it's like, it's kind of old, but people just really want to hear it, so you got to put it out there.
Well, I feel a little differently about it, because, first of all, if someone hasn't heard it, it's not old. It's brand new.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's sort of like being in a play. If you're in, well, King Lear or Hamlet now, someone could say, well, that's a very old play. No, it's a very good play. It's a great play, and it's beautiful that it's still around and that we can put our prints on.
But I will say, and I don't know what your take on this is, that one of the reasons that the 5 levels is so great is because people like to hear it again. They want to hear it again. So what do you think there is about that? Do you think about, like, oh, could I make another one that's like that? Do you ever sit back and think about that, or is it just very?
Well, sure, but you never know what's going to stick like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's what a great secret joy that is to comedy, which is when people begin to realize, even if you heard a joke or a piece or anything in comedy, it doesn't take the surprise away. It doesn't take the joy away at all. You're thrilled to hear it.
Right.
Again, I am, and you want to hear if it's that piece, whether it's mine or anyone else's. What a pleasure that is to have folks say, "Wow, I didn't know I'd enjoy it the second time or the 10th time." Oh, it's a great pleasure.
Yeah, that's great. And so what I was mentioning with that special was the opening sketch. I ended up, because HBO still runs all those specials from, the many different years, the young comedian specials and all the hour specials. And so the opening sketch of your special it's a Masterpiece Theater.
That's right.
Spoof, and it's you sitting by the fireplace. And we actually produced this thing, Larry, so I might even be able to get the audio of that. But it's there's a wench and a few peasants.
That's right.
And the first peasant, I think, is Jerry Seinfeld, and the other one is David Spade. And then the woman came up, and I said, "Who was the woman?" And you said, "That's my wife."
Right. One of the greatest actresses. She's a Academy, many award-winning writer-producer. But we're all in show business, so it was you write these characters, and then that's right. It was a great memory. Seinfeld. We got a rental suit from a costume warehouse. They only had one. That was it's just so silly. Of say a Bahamian or Jamaican policeman, which is sort of the old British
helmet,
thing of the red coat and the blue belt and the blue pants and those white hats they wore that are straight. Who knows who designed these things, by the way? Because they were. You didn't want to cross those guys. They were tough policemen, but I mean But so Seinfeld could come in and do that 2-foot thing, that clump clump. Yes, sir. It just so silly. But it's the great fun of comedy, because it does work if you. That's right. And Eileen did funny as you said, the wench and Spade, and Jonathan Schmuck was there, by the way, too.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
It's just so funny. You write something. How extraordinary it is, not only that we're here, and especially as comics, but at a time in America where there's no giant war going on, we can write these things that are making fun of other times.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful. And then after you do that, no one ever says, you've just caused servants to come back again. No, I haven't. It's comedy. If anyone does that, well, they'd be making a mistake.
Now, did you, and obviously you're friends with Jerry, did you know David Spade at that point, or did he just kind of...
No, it's the same thing. You get to know pretty much everyone. It's not that big a group, and it's a real pleasure. They get to know you, you get to know them, and you like saying hi to each other at the Improv, and then you get closer, and there's that group, again, from the comic strip in New York, where it's sort of your freshman year friends you're friends with forever.
Right.
But, yeah, you get to know people, and... I said to Eileen, how about this? And she said, how about David Spade? I said, hey, great. So I called him up, and then, hey, you want to do this? Okay, sure. It's, in a way, it becomes that simple.
Yeah, that was great.
That was a fun sketch to do. That's just making fun. You have PBS Masterpiece Theater.
Yeah, I'll definitely track down the audio, but yeah, I got to watch the whole thing again. But that's just what I remember was that you mentioned the Seinfeld had the big helmet.
There's no way. I didn't say, or the director said, you have to wear that. He thought, well, this is fun. It's silly. I'll put it on. And we said, great, yeah. We tried it with it and said, well, it looks good from here.
And both of those guys did an accent, which I think maybe that was just for their reel at that point, right?
No, it was that it could have been.
Yeah.
But no, I wrote it that way. It's going to be a Masterpiece Theater type thing, like an upstairs, downstairs show, for a sketch. But sure, that they would be. It's just making me laugh again because you write these things and sometimes you remember, hey, that's right, it was funny.
Yeah.
But I mean, that they would have accents. That was the idea from the beginning. That they would have upper crust accents or lower crust accents, if that's a phrase.
Yeah.
It's just fun to do.
And did you meet your wife out after you moved out here, or?
Yeah, after out here, I got to know her at the Improv, which again is a place, as you know, that a lot of folks come by, and it becomes kind of a hangout and a clearinghouse.
Yeah.
I hope it still is.
And did you guys work on a project together before you started dating, or did you?
No, we. I knew I was really attracted to her, and so eventually I just asked her out, and here we are. Well, again, I'm sitting in this chair. Here we are. And she's downstairs on the computer.
Yeah, well, I guess that was kind of the question was, I guess, what was the big break, or I guess the big motion to move out here, or to move from New York to L.A., because you were doing the comic strip and that kind of stuff.
Well, when we were comics in New York, that was the general idea of the plan, that you'd spend 3, 4, 5 years in New York learning how to be a good comic. And then, when you felt about ready, you'd put your underwear and sneakers in a bag and fly to L.A. and live on a friend's floor for a couple of weeks while you found an apartment.
Yeah.
Which I did, which just about everyone, I think, did. And, well, then you go on and, well, the Comedy Store, the Improv, both, in my case, and then just you start and you're looking for an agent. And then, so the answer to how do you get into show business? Well, that's how you're in.
Yeah.
How do you get in? You start writing jokes. I was asked once. I'm still fond of this story. I was asked once to be on a panel of the questions of show business, and there was Danny Robinson, who's an agent, and who was there? I think Bud Friedman and Mark Lano were there. They owned the Improv, and then me as a comic and an actor. And the point is, people would ask from the audience, hey, to get on the Tonight Show, how do I do that? So should I call the producer, or should I have my agent call the talent coordinator? And I said, every time a question was asked, write jokes, tell them. If they're not funny, rewrite them.
Right.
Now go home. And I meant that with affection.
Yeah.
Because there's really no plan to. Then someone else would ask, yes, but you have to audition the material. And I'd say, please, listen to me. Write jokes. Tell them. If they're not funny, rewrite them. Now
Yeah.
go home. The fact that you're still here is a bad sign.
Right.
But I meant that with affection, that's really what you do in show business.
Yeah, that's the part that you can control.
How do you write the novel? Write the novel. Well, what do I do? Write the novel.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was just curious if at that point, like, the Tonight Show was like the big goal still, or it was just like I'm doing what I want to do.
Oh, it's all of that. But
Yeah.
Tonight Show was always the big thing to do. I was very lucky and happy. I was doing the Merv Griffin show, and he was a great guy, and all the comics really liked him, and then also I did the Mike Douglas show a handful of times before that. That was the first thing I did, and then have a chance to be on the David Letterman show, and then that happened. I guess about 5 years later, after moving out, that I got Jim McCauley, who's passed on now, came and saw me, and my manager at the time, and Rick, and it happened. So you audition first time, you don't get it. Well, that's right. I remember, in fact, I was jogging with Seinfeld the day after I auditioned for the Tonight Show the first time, and then we were jogging the next day. So he said, "How'd the audition go?" I said, "Well, he saw some stuff he thought was he didn't like. Well, whatever." And he said, "Oh well, I guess you'll just have to do the audition again." And I said to him, "Can I get 2 minutes from you of, gee, that's too bad, or what a shame it didn't happen?" And he laughed, but then I realized instantly, no, what's the point of that?
Right.
Because he's exactly right. well, I'll have to do it again now.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that you can do those things again,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really no trouble. That's another great lesson in life. What happened when you did it again? Well, I just did it again. Well, it's not that the sun suddenly rose in the west and sank in the east.
Right.
It's, I got that right, didn't I? That's the opposite of it. But, so you learn how to do that. Well, I guess you'll just have to go do it again, or go home, write jokes, tell them, rewrite them. If they're not funny, rewrite them. Now go home.
Well, I guess that's the thing. I mean, I've realized this now that it is about just doing it. It's the long haul, but there are the people that come out here and it's like either I make it or I don't. Like it's everything's so immediate.
Yeah.
Or I get this one audition for Last Comic Standing. If I don't make it, it's over. And it's like,
Well, I know what you mean, but one of the greatest lessons I think, if there's anything to teach, is don't do that. Be in show business.
Mm-hmm.
Live your life in show business. If you're 24 years old, and let's say you're lucky you live to be 84,
Mm-hmm.
well, then spend those years in show business.
right.
You're still going to grow older,
Yeah.
and, you can... Is it going to help you to become a computer salesman in Indianapolis? Probably not. Be in show business.
Okay, here's my other story that I wanted to remember. So, you told me a story about Val Kilmer, which I don't know if you remember this.
Sure, being in the movie, the Kiss Kiss Bang Bang?
But I think the main point was that you were a big fan at that
right.
point.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was a great treat to be. I mean, it's a big movie with Val Kilmer and Robert Downey Jr. and a lot of really prominent folks. And for the first day, for the table read, which is where, and the producer, Joel Silver, and, the director and everybody, all the producers, all the age, everybody comes in, and the whole cast.
Mm-hmm.
And I had just, at that time, the movie Tombstone had been out for a couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a terrific movie and has some really fine stuff in it. It's very, very good. And one of the things I really liked about it was Val Kilmer was playing Doc Holliday, and the character he put together for that, every actor can do a terrific job at that. Well, if he's good, if he's great. And I think Dennis Quaid did a great job in the other Wyatt Earp movie.
Uh-huh.
But at any rate, so I went up to Val Kilmer and said, because he had this accent on, it was like an Eastern Southern accent. It was lyrical, but it was more like the early 19th century. It sounded like the coastline of North Carolina, South Carolina, sort of the coastlines that, it wasn't a hard R sort of Texas accent.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many different kinds of Southern accents. But this was, he had some great stuff in it that he laid out there. Just, why, Johnny Ringo, you look like someone just walked over your grave. Where grave has 3 syllables. Grave. It was so good, though.
Mm-hmm.
He made it so meaningful. Everything in it was so great. And I said to him, as we were all just meeting before we even read the thing, I said to him, and he was very nice, very gracious, and he was a pleasure to talk to. And I said, let me ask you something. I know this is going to sound goofy, but that accent, why did you pick that accent for that part? And he kind of lit up a little bit. He said, I've always, no one's ever asked that, and it was very meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and he told me the story about why he picked that accent and why he thought it would be good for those lines and what he wanted to do with the character. And as he's telling me, and the whole story, it wasn't that long, it was about 5 minutes, but that's long. And as he's telling me, I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe it. I'm going to be working with Val Kilmer. I have a chance to meet him today, and I've asked him this question, and he's telling me. It's something I always thought would be great if he told me. And he is, right now. And then he finished the story, and I realized that I hadn't heard any of it because I spent the whole time thinking, he's telling me. And then he finished it, and I realized I'm looking at him thinking, what do I do now? Say, would you mind telling me that again? And instead I just said, wow, great, okay, and we all sat down and did this thing. But that's kind of a funny show business moment of, you get a chance to ask something, the guy is so nice, he tells you, but you're not even listening because you're still thinking, he's telling me.
And you're also kind of proud of yourself that you got this question that you feel like he hasn't been asked 1,000 times or anything, too. Like,
Excuse me. I was proud about the whole thing. Very pleased with the situation, except for one tiny part. I wasn't listening.
Oh, and the other one was the, I don't know if you can tell this one. Can you tell the Dennis Farina one or no? Or is that a secret?
Oh, you mean the secret of show business?
The secret of show business? Or I can...
Yeah, there was a Bag Boy. It was it's a very good movie, and it's been out and on already, and it's really well done, and it was a real pleasure. And it was shot in Salt Lake City and all the environs around there. Mm-hmm. It was a real pleasure. I was there about, I guess, 5-6 weeks, and Dennis Farina was one of the stars, and he was there 2-3 months. And it was the same sort of thing. I can't resist meeting people and doing what may be stupid things, but I just can't resist because I think the guy is so terrific, that I walked up and did something from... What was that movie? The Robert De Niro, the Charles Grodin movie.
Oh, Midnight Run, yeah.
Midnight Run. That is that when he was a Chicago homicide detective for 20 years, and that's his voice and that's his act. He's just great at it.
That's one of my favorite movies, by the way.
It's a great movie. It's a wonderful movie.
And did you do was it the Moron #1?
Yeah, and I walked up to him. He was at lunch. They brought me to the set. I was just checking in to meet. Great show business stuff. You meet the makeup people and the hair people and the wardrobe, and you check this out and that. And then we went to lunch, and Dennis was already sitting there. It's lunch, you're eating. So they took me over and introduced me, and I thought it was great. And then he was very nice and shook hands and smiled. And I couldn't resist. I just said, "Is this Moron #1? Put Moron #2 on the phone. If you're not, I'm going to stick this phone in your ear." Whatever it was, I don't do impressions well, but he was gracious enough to laugh. God only knows
how many times
people do that to him.
Is this Moron #1? Put Moron #2 on the phone.
Yeah, Jimmy, he's right here. Hold on. He's pissed. Yeah.
I thought you told me this guy was going to be on the plane.
That's the information we got, Jimmy.
That's the information we got. I'm going to tell you something. I want this guy taken out, and I want him taken out fast. You and that other dummy better start getting more personally involved in your work, or I'm going to stab you through the heart with a fucking pencil. Do you understand me?
You got it, Jimmy.
It was great fun, and then it was just a treat to work with the guy. So this is 5 weeks. I'm with him a ton on the set there, and he was in a situation where they bring him coffee but in his trailer he had a special coffee machine, and they said, Dennis, and one of the women on the set would say, "Dennis, you want some more coffee?" And he would say, "Sure, sweetheart, thanks." And she'd go in and get him some coffee and bring it out onto the set. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't set coffee; it was fine. So I'm standing there at the, and this is every day. This is 4 or 5 cups a day, throughout the working. And on the last day of shooting, he and I were in a scene together on the last day of shooting on the whole movie. And he said to me, as we were standing there in between shots, and we were still standing right in front of the camera, and we're still talking. We really just enjoyed the same old movies, and we're talking about something. And so one of the women came back and said, "You, Dennis, want another cup of coffee?" He said, "Sure, sweetheart, thanks." And then he'd say, "Wait, hold on a second." He said to me, "You know what?" He said, "We've been getting along, and I think you're this, and you're that." He said something nice, and he said, "You want a cup of coffee too? A cup of my coffee from the trailer?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to put you out or anything." And he just said, "No, hold on a second." He said, "Sweetheart, do me a favor, make that 2 cups of coffee." And I said, "Well, thanks." He said, "Well, while we're waiting for it, in fact, have a sip of mine here." Now that's just kind of an odd thing to do, to offer someone a sip of your coffee, especially when it has a lid on it with a little hole in it for the mouth. And I said, "Well, that's all right." And we're very close. We're in our spots for the scene, so we're only about a foot or two away from each other. Mm-hmm. And he just said, No, have a sip of the coffee, and you'll see if you like it. And I said, "Dennis, I don't know what you..." It just sounded, it felt a little odd, and he just said, "Have a sip." And I said, all right, I'm looking at him, and I don't see anything wrong with it. And I said, okay. He said, I said have a sip. And I took the cup, and I took a sip out of it. It wasn't coffee. It was some kind of whiskey.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not expecting that, you're surprised. And I just said, are you kidding me? Do you mean this whole time on this movie, 4 or 5 times a day? So every time they say, hey, Dennis, and they go into your trailer to get something, they know what they're getting. They're going to pour you some more whiskey in a coffee cup.
Yeah.
And he said, that's the secret of show business. But I thought that was just, I think the guy is great, and he's just great fun to watch in everything he does. But I thought that's a pretty neat show business story. There are people walking around sitting a shot up, and Dennis Farina says, have a sip of my coffee.
Yeah, and it's I don't even think it's that Midnight Run, I remember these lines. It's just he says it's almost like a poet or something, because he has that line about Sydney, relax, get yourself a cream soda.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and with that voice, Sydney, relax. But you realize this guy, he's playing a killer. He's playing someone who's going to strangle people, but he's great in everything he does. And yes, Sydney, relax, get yourself a cream soda.
What are you hanging around for? Take a walk. I heard somebody picked up Mardukas in New York. It's old news, Sidney. I'm already on it. I don't have to tell you what'll happen if he becomes a government witness. I can assure you that will not be the case. Yeah, I assumed you were taking that position, but I am supposed to advise you against such acts. Sidney, relax. Have a cream soda. Everything is going to be all over with in a few minutes.
Sorry, Jimmy, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen. Say that again, Tony.
It just didn't happen. I mean, there was cops all over the place. There was a million fucking feds all over. I mean, Jimmy, it was a mess. It was a real mess.
You better get off the line, Jimmy.
Sidney?
If they've got a tap on that line there...
Sidney, shut your fucking mouth.
Now listen to me, dummy. Do they have Mardukas in custody or not?
I don't, Jimmy, I don't know. I mean, the cops are swarming all over the place. We couldn't see anything.
Let me tell you two stupid motherfuckers something. I don't want to get another phone call like this, because if I do, I'm going to get on a fucking plane and I'm going to blowtorch the both of you. Do you understand?
Stop. I'm on the phone. I'm talking to Jimmy. What are you doing?
I should have killed Walsh in Chicago a long time ago. Don't say a word to me, Sidney. Don't say a fucking word to me. I'll get up and I'll bury this telephone in your head.
It's just like the perfect blend of words.
It really was. It's a heck of a movie.
Yeah.
It makes me a little sad when they call that, and I'll see it anytime it's on, but when they just say comedy or light comedy or something like that, when they describe it, I want to say, you know what? It's so much more than that.
Yeah,
it's such a deep story about not only their friendship that buds, but with De Niro and Grodin, but who those characters are,
right,
and what touches them. When he meets his daughter outside of Chicago, there, it's very moving stuff. So if folks haven't seen that, boy, that Midnight Run, it's a heck of a movie.
Yeah, great movie. Well, I want to. I'll wrap things up because you've been very generous with your time, but I just wanted to mention, like, we haven't seen each other in a while, and I know you had I don't know what you want to speak to.
The brain injury?
Yeah.
I lost my brain.
We just found it.
It's so weird.
It was downstairs.
It's like when you can't find your keys and you say, why don't I put them on the table in the hall next to the phone every time? But you never do. And then you lose your keys, and I lost my brain. Then I found it.
And it's back.
Yeah, and a team of surgeons hooked it in. Perfect, like 30 hours. And then I was just 100%. But then I realized I found myself speaking Japanese and playing the violin. And I don't play the violin or speak Japanese. So we went back in to the doctors. Turns out it wasn't my brain. I found someone else's. Then we got that guy. He had my brain.
The old switcheroo.
And he didn't want to give it up. He liked being funny. But it was very nice of him. We changed it back. I was very lucky. And you know what? These are the kinds of things that happen in life. It was talking friends, family. And I was very lucky, as I told you. It could have been one of those things where you really wallop yourself And as I told you, that suddenly you find yourself shooting up in a beam of light next to another guy in another beam of light, and you just say to him, wow, I guess that was it, huh? And he says, boy, I guess so. But I'm very lucky because there was nothing dramatic wrong, and you just heal up and then keep going at the healing, you know. But I'm very lucky I have a chance to not only be with the family, but be what I am, which is a comic and an actor and a writer.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know a lot of people were worried, and a lot of people are very happy right now knowing that you're okay and you're back at it. And that's what I brought you your gift there, because I've had that for about, I think, a year. I brought Larry a Jerry Garcia tie, so because I know he's a big fan and of ties and Jerry Garcia.
That's right. I guess I'm a deadhead. I always have been. But, you know, that we were just saying before the show that you'd think, and Jerry Garcia's passed on, boy, I thought he was always just the greatest guitar player and guy to look at in these movies or something or films and say, boy, what's it like to hang out with him? And that if a guy like that, such a hip, interesting guy and a great musician, if suddenly he says to a friend of his in life, you know, I'm thinking of starting a side business with a product. Oh, yeah, what do you think you're making? Ties. I'm thinking of making ties. You know what? That's either the coolest thing in the world, and I think it is. I have one myself, but it was very meaningful. As I said to Paul, you know what? You can be sure this is one of those gifts that you're going to give in life that will be used immediately and often.
Yeah, well, I'm happy I was able to give it to you. That's one of the things that every time I saw it, I was like, just hoping you're okay, and so happy to see that you are, and we'll be doing some shows together.
That's right.
Coming up, and
it's very meaningful to hear that, by the way, because it's nice that a little gesture like that can happen and be important.
Well, I'm glad. Well, I'm sure you'll have your own tie, and I think the other thing that Jerry Garcia is known for is probably ice cream, which I don't know if it's the Cherry Garcia.
Oh, holy mackerel, yeah. Those fellas up in Vermont make that.
Yeah, the Ben and Jerry's.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know what? Whatever is associated with that man and his name and the other fellas in the dead there, and whatever they're still doing now, they had a lot of big chunks of their lives.
Yeah.
Boy, I'll tell you what. Well, if you're a deadhead, you know that's some great music. Some people say, gee, I just don't like it. Well, that's fine. But I do.
Yeah, and my sister has the tattoos to prove it. She followed him around for a little while.
Well, first of all, everyone makes mistakes. But no, you know what? It was a very good thing going to see the Grateful Dead play. It wasn't that much. It was like 5 or 10 times, I guess, and I will always be a fan, and that's who I am.
Yeah, and that's an experience. I mean, that's the funny thing now is, you know, the satellite radio, you'll see the Grateful Dead channel, and it'll be like Arlington, Texas, 1974. Right. And it's just an endless amount of archives that they have that people listen to those shows. And I even saw a documentary about I think it was the Lithuanian basketball team in 1992 or something. They had just gotten their independence and didn't have any money, and I guess Jerry Garcia had read about it in the newspaper, and they sponsored the team, so they bought them uniforms, and they were tie-dye uniforms. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, it's so somehow when they do that, it feels about right.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like, oh, what are you doing to them? It feels like, well, holy mackerel, you get to wear a uniform that the Grateful Dead got you?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I would wear one of those on The Tonight Show or on Letterman or something, you know, what are you wearing? This is a Grateful Dead T-shirt.
Yeah.
Well, probably I wouldn't, come to think of it.
All right. Well, Larry, thanks so much for having me. I hope it didn't take up too much of your time, but I'm glad we finally got to catch up and that you're doing well. And you have the one-man show. Those dates are on your website, I'm assuming? Or?
Yeah, that's going to be coming back. That's right. Well, there's and I have a podcast due.
Yeah, there's a lot of huge fans of your podcast. I know. I think I told you I did the Bob and Tom show in Indianapolis, and I think he gave me. Did he ever send that to you? I guess it's his orchestra of guys redid your theme song for your podcast,
That's
which
right.
I thought was a cool homage to it.
It really is. It's a great world, what you're doing and I'm doing, not just comedy and acting and writing, but podcasts are great. I don't know where they're going to go, but you know what? I don't care. I'm glad they're here now. And so if people are interested, they could go to LarryMillerPodcast.com, which is see, without the producer of the show here to tell me, I don't actually know these things. It's the thing you can go to. And there's a Facebook page, but I can't remember what the name of it is now.
Yeah, it's just on iTunes. It's you're under the Adam Carolla banner, I
That's
think,
right. The name of the show is This Week with Larry Miller.
Mm-hmm.
But I love doing, you know what? With a little luck, next time we're together, I'll get a tie for you.
Okay, thanks.
Trucking, got my chips cashed in, keep trucking, like the Doodah Man together, more or less in line, just keep trucking on.
Oh, can't tell you how happy I am to interview Larry and know that he's well and back and better than ever after the little scary incident last year. So he's good. He's great, as a matter of fact, and is always a motivating and uplifting person to talk to. I always feel better leaving the room after talking to Larry Miller. So that was fun. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And like I said, I'll get the this bonus episode up, this interview that we did a few years earlier when he was just developing a set for the Late Show with David Letterman, and we just kind of talked about his career up to that point, which is kind of cool to listen to. And he's a super interesting guy. He's got a lot of great stories and is hilarious. So hope you guys enjoyed that. Like I said, you can help support the podcast, support our sponsors, Uber, Amazon.com, and Hotels.com. Just go to AlleyOopPodcast.com and click on the sponsor links there. And tell your friends about the podcast. The more the merrier. It doesn't cost anything. We're keeping it free for you. Free episodes till we die. So make sure you tell your friends to subscribe or make a nice comment or click like. I know it sounds stupid, but it actually helps with the sponsors and all that kind of stuff. So thank you guys so much for supporting the Alley Oop Podcast, and yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
What a long, strange trip it's been.